Bem could help July meant such farming tools, scarcely to be called equipment, as he and his villagers owned. The span of yokes and traces they shared, taking turns to plow, was kept in a special hut where no one lived. The heavy chains trailed across the floor, hose hung from the roof. There was the musty, nutty smell of stored grain in baskets. Some had been there picking over beans on one of the mats used as table tops or bowls. Maureen saw the arrangement as broken beads set aside from the good ones, choices made by someone momentarily absent. The dioramas of primitive civilizations in a natural history museum contrived to produce tableaux like that. Bem was determined to rig up a water tank, the round, corrugated tin kind that had somehow been lugged that far into the bush but never installed. July laughed and gave it a kick. As Victor had the bath. No, I mean it. If we can get hold of a bag of cement, we can make a foundation. I saw some old piping lying somewhere. You could have quite decent rainwater supply all through the rainy months. It's a waste. The women won't need to go to the river. It'll be much better to drink than river water. There was no bag of cement, but they worked together more or less as they did when Bem expected July to help him with the occasional building or repair jobs that had to be done. Maintain a seven-roomed house and swimming pool. Bem made do with stones for foundation. He kept the radio near and at the hours when news bulletins were read, she would appear from wherever she might be. They stood and listened together. There were other radios in the community, bellowing, chattering, twanging pop music, and the sprightly patter of commercials in a black language. The news reader's gardening talk voice spoke English only to the white pair, only for them. They didn't comment and for each watched the other's face, but whatever each hoped to find there of a sudden decision made, or dreaded to find of news grounds for fear did not appear. There was fierce fighting around James Mutt Airport. The city center under martial law had been quiet last night, but mortar fire was heard and confused reports had been received of heavy fighting and in the eastern and northern suburbs. The Red Cross appealed for blood. The gasworks had been attacked, and the explosion had started a fire that spread suburban houses. Bem's eyebrows flew up and exposed his gaze only across the valley, the freeway, from the house they had chosen to build in a quiet suburb. U.S. Congress was debating the organization of a United States government airlift for American nationals. It was not known from where it would operate. Cape Town, Durban, and Port Elizabeth airports were closed, and their ports bombed and blockaded. Maureen looked away where a young boy was emptying a basket headload of stones as July directed. She had been for trying to get to the coast. Lucky to be alive. Neither could expect the other to say what would come next, what to do next, not yet. Arrange the stones brought from some other attempt to build something that had fallen into run. That was how people lived here, rearranging their meager resources around the bases of nature, letting the walls of mud sink back to mud, and then using that mud for new walls, in other cleaning, among other convenient rocks. No one remembered where the water tank came from. July said he would ask the old woman but never did, although she sat outside the woman's hut most of the day on the ground making brooms out of some special grasses that women collected. The water tank was from back there, like the Smiles and the children. The white man was the one to make a place for it here. Beyond the clearing, the settlement of huts, livestock kraals, and stamped and burnt off patches, which were the lands. The buttock fold in the trees indicated the river, and that was the end of measured distance. Like clouds, the savanna bush formed and reformed under the changes of light, moved or gave the impression of being moved past by the traveling eye. Silent and ashy green mold spread and always spreading, rolling out under the sky before her. There were hundreds of tracks, used since ancient migrations never ended. Her family was the latest, not seen. There were people wearing circles of habitation marked by euphoria and brush hedges like this one. Fungoid fairy rings on grass not seen. There were cattle crackling through under the screen undergrowth, and the stillness of wild animals, all not to be seen. Space so confining in its immensity, her children did not know it was there. Royce headed the delegation. Can't we go to a film today or tomorrow? The postponement and inkling, the confusion of time with that other dimension proper to this place. Even though Gina and Victor were old enough to know cinemas had been left behind, they did not stop him asking, and sulked and quarrelled afterwards on the car seat beds in the hut, scratching flea bites. Maureen could not walk out into boundlessness, not so far to take the dog around and the block or to the box to post a letter. She could go to the river, but no further. And not often when she did go, she did so believing it better not to go at all than the risk of being seen now. July came to fetch her family's clothes for the women to wash down there. I can do it myself. They had so few, they wore so little. The children had abundant shoes. There was no question of a fresh pair of shorts and socks every day, but he stood in the manner of one who will not go away without what he has come for. Then I must carry water for you. I make it hot, everything. She saw she could not expect to be indulged here in any idea she knew nothing about. Will your wife do it? I must pay. It was women's business in his home. His short laugh tugged with his fingers at the ends of loose bundle she had made. I don't know who or who, but you can pay. And soap? She was cherishing a big cake of toilet soap, carefully drying it after each use, keeping it on the top of her towel, out of the reach of the little children. I bring soap. Soap he had remembered to take from her store cupboard. He cleaned clothes, smelled of a lifebuoy she brought for them, their servants. He didn't say, perhaps merely not to boast his foresight. She was going to ask, and quite so she could not. I'll pay for it. Bundle of notes were bits of paper in this place. Did not represent to her. The refrigerator full of frozen meat and ice cubes, the newspapers, waterborne sewage, bedside lamps, money could not provide here. But its meaning was not dissociated. For July's villagers, she saw how when Xiaobam, who were completely dependent on these people, had nothing but bits of paper to give them. Not even clothes so prized by the poor. So to spare, they secreted the paper money in the tied rags and strange crumpled pouches about their persons. They were able to make the connection between the abstract and the concrete. July and others like him, all able men, went away to work, had been sending these bits of papers for so long, had been bringing over 15 years. That meant seven home leaves, many things that bits of paper could transform into. From the bicycle Bum had got for him at a discount to the supermarket pink glass teacups. July's wife hut, his own hut, the huts of 3 or 4 other families within the family, their goat kraal, the chicken coops made of twiggy dead branches stayed into the earth in a rough crisscross hoops, the pig pen enclosed by the fusion of organic and inorganic barriers, thorny alleys, battered hubcaps salvaged from wrecked cars, plates, crumbling tin, mud bricks, the hut where the farming implements were kept. These were the objective and daily landmarks available. She moved between them, neither working as others did nor able to do nothing as others did. She did have one book, a thick paperback, snatched up in passing until that moment, something brought years ago and never read. Perhaps it was meant for this kind of situation. Manzoni's hypothesis posits in translation as the betrothed. She did not want to begin it because what would happen when she had read it. There was no other. Then she overcame the taboo. If she did not read, they would find a solution soon. If she did read the book, they would still be here when it was finished. She dragged the lame stool July had supplied for the children out where she had a view of the bush, and began. But the transport of a novel, the false awareness of being within another time, place, and life, was the pleasure of reading for her was not possible. She was in another time, place, unconsciousness. It pressed in upon her and filled her as someone's breath fills balloon shape. She was already not what she was. No fiction could compete with what she was finding. She did not know, could not have imagined or discovered through imagination. They had nothing. In their houses there was nothing. At first you had to stay in the dark of a hut long while make out what was on the walls. In the wife's hut, wavy pattern of broad white and ochre hands. In others, she did not know whether or not she was welcome where they dipped in and out all day from dark to light like swallows. She caught a glimpse of single painted circle and eye target. As she saw it, in one dwelling where she was invited to enter, there was the tail of an animal and an rodent skull, dried gut dangling from the thatch. Commonly there were very small mirrors snapping at the stray beams of light like hungry fish rising. They reflected nothing. An sensation of seeing something intricately banal, manufactured, replicated, made her turn as if someone had spoken to her from back there. It was in the hut where the yokes and traces for plough oxen were. She went inside again, discovered insignia like war medals nailed just to the left of the dark doorway. The enamel emblems Red Cross was foxed and pitted with damp, bonded with the dirt to the mud and the dung plaster that was slowly incorporating it. The engraved lettering on brass arm plate had filled with rust. The one was a medallion of kind of represent to black miners who pass a first aid exam on how to treat injuries likely to occur underground. There was a black miner's badge of rank, the highest open to him. Someone from the mines someone had gone to the gold mines and come home with these trophies, or they had been sent home. Where was the owner? No one lived in this hut, but someone had possessions. His treasures displayed, had gone away or died, was forgotten of or was commemorated by the evidence of these objects left or placed in the hut. Mine workers had been coming from these places for a long time, almost as young as mines had existed. She had raised the blast arm plaque, boss boy. The shift boss's gang earned recognition and advancement. He is proud of his boss boy, and some among the succession of incumbents have been recruited again and again from the kraals and the huts, repeating the migrant workers 18-month contract for the whole period of my Jim's own working life on western areas, while his girls are growing up ambitious to be ballet dancers. So the white schoolgirl is coming across the intersection where the shops are, chewing gum and moving to the tune of summer afternoon humming. In the step beside her is a woman, age blacks retain between youth and the time when their sturdy, comfortable breast and backsides become lean weight, their gold thick of lead slow to stop old age. The black woman chews gum too. Her woolen cap is over 1 year and she carries on her head school case amateurishly stenciled in blue Maureen Hetherington. When the black woman makes to move against the traffic light suddenly gone red, while the white girl grabs her hand and to stop her, and they continue to hold hands loosely and easily while waiting for the light to change. Then they had caper across together. Lydia scarcely needs to put up the other hand to steady the heavy case. She does so as John trees of the set of her head. The pair are to be seen going like this over the intersection at the local shops and the shortcut through the open world. Later there was an industrial area established there, the metal box factory and the potato crisp plant. So to the mine married quarters, the shift bosses' houses are behind the recreation center where ballet classes are held. Lydia has the backdoor key of the shift boss. My Jim's wife works in an estate agent office and is out all day. Our Jim cleans the shoes and digs in the garden. Lydia has the time to herself. Her housework is varied by frequent saunters to shops where she goes to pick up loaf, starch from the washing, or simply to meet and talk to other black people on similar errands. Maureen often bumps into her there. On her way to homeschool, Lydia expects her. Maybe she sets out to do some shopping at the time. She knows Maureen will be coming off the school bus. Once met, they are in no hurry. It is a hot time of the day. Lydia sits on Maureen's case, continuing the long conversation she was engaged in before the girl was sighted, and Maureen goes to the Greek shop to get a coke, which they share, mouth about, and if she has the cash, some gum or chocolate. Lydia swings the case and it contained blazer gym shoes, as well as a load of books onto her head. Sometimes they giggle and are in cahoots. Don't tell you so, hey Lydia, when she has come from school on the back of a boy's bicycle instead of safely by bus. Darling, how can I tell? You are my true friend, isn't it? At other times, Lydia is in a chastising, critical mood. It is directed first at these people, anyone with whom she has been wrangling over fluffy beds, or the complicated ethics of the club which she belongs, into whose funds each member pays part of her wages every month, so that each in turn may have a bonus month when she is recipient of the sum of the all others' contributions. That woman, that sister-in-law's law of Gladys. She is holding the money, but I am telling her, why if you holding, you are not paying like being like everybody. Why you must go get your month? But I am short. Then the mood is turned on the girl, brooding over buried misdemeanors. Maureen, you know your father, he is getting cross. If you're going to lose that thing again like the last time, the battery lantern from the camping kit in his garage workshop. She promised it as a spotlight for the school mighty play. Maureen, why you take the pillows from your bed? Let your friends make them dirty on the grass. Your mother, she is going to shout me when she sees those marks in the ocean. The dog with his feet and everything. Lovey, don't worry. I'll tell mom. Ma, the dog came in and jumped on my bed. I'll put everything back. I promise you, hanging weedily around her neck. That was lighter than the rest of her. But how was she? Naked. She was very prudish about the body and the functions of the body, had never revealed herself in a stage of undress rather than her nylon bloomers in bare, lifted underarms, dingy purplish. The neck smelled of clean ironing, fish frying, and the whiffs that comes up from her feet that walked in sweated plastic spoiled sole slippers. The plump neck had 3 inches of pearls. The graceful lines of a young woman must have been only her late 20s or early 30s. One afternoon, a photographer took a picture of Maureen and Lydia. They saw him dancing about on bent legs to get them in focus just there at the shops while they crossed the road. When he had taken his photographs, he came up and asked them if they minded. Lydia was in command. She put her hands on her hips without disturbing the balance of the burden on her head. But you must send us picture. We like to have the picture, he promised, and aimed at them again as they went on their way. He had not written down the address, number 20, married quarters, the western area's gold mines. So how could they get the photograph? Years later, someone showed it to Boring Smells in a live copy table book about the country and its policies. White white heron walk attitudes and lifestyles. The marvelous photograph of the white schoolgirl and the black woman with girls with the girl's school case on her head, while Lydia carried her case. Did the photographer know what he saw when they crossed the road like that together? Did the book, placing the pair in its context, given the reason she and Lydia, in their affection and ignorance, didn't know?